Hey, welcome. We hear the word resilience tossed around all the time, right? But what if it's way more than just bouncing back? Today, we're going to dig into the science and the story of resilience. And we're going to use a real crisis in modern medicine to figure out what it actually means to be resilient. Let's start with a number, and this one really sets the stage. Research shows that physicians are 1.97 times more likely to experience burnout than people in other professions. That's, yeah, that's nearly twice as likely. This isn't just an academic problem, it's an urgent one happening in our healthcare system right now. And that staggering number leads to a really powerful question that researchers started asking. Okay, so if 1 in 5 doctors is burning out, what about the other 4? Are they just built differently? Are they tougher? Or is there something else going on? That something else is exactly what we're here to unpack. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the crisis and care. Then, we're going to journey through the 3 waves of how we've come to understand resilience. We'll clear up the confusion between resilience and other buzzwords, then we'll tackle a big one. Is it a trait you're born with or a process you learn? And finally, we'll get into the debate. Who's responsible for it? The doctor or the system? So let's dive right in. We need to understand why this conversation is so incredibly important right now. The high-pressure world of modern medicine, it's really become a crucial case study for human endurance. First, where does this word even come from? Well, it goes way back to Latin, resilire. It literally means to leap back or rebound. And that simple idea, bouncing back, it's the foundation. But as we're about to see, modern science has built a whole lot more on top of it. And that's because our understanding of resilience didn't just appear overnight. It's evolved. Researchers actually talk about it coming in 3 distinct waves. And with each wave, the questions got deeper and a lot more interesting. So here's a quick look at that evolution. Back in the 70s, it was all about identifying qualities. Then in the 90s, the focus shifted to understanding the actual process. And since the 2000s, we've been exploring the motivation behind it all. Let's take a closer look at each one. The first wave started with a simple question: who? Researchers were looking at kids in really tough, high-risk environments, and they were fascinated by the ones who, against all odds, thrived. They called them invulnerable, and they made lists of their traits, things like optimism, autonomy, good communication. At this point, resilience was seen as something you kind of had or you didn't. But just having a list of traits, well, that wasn't the whole story. So the second wave of research shifted the question from who to how. How does someone actually become resilient? And this is where the idea of a process really takes hold. It's a cycle. You face a challenge, you get disrupted, and then you have to reintegrate. And it's in that reintegration that resilience is built. It's not just something you have, it's something you do. And that brings us to the third wave, which is pretty much where we are now. This one asks an even deeper question. Why? What is it that fuels this whole process? And this is where the picture gets a lot bigger, expanding beyond just the individual to include the environment, your family, your community, your workplace, your sense of purpose. All of these things can either fuel your resilience or drain it. Okay, so we've gone from who has it to how it works to why our environment matters so much. And because this idea has gotten so much bigger and more complex, it's no surprise that it gets mixed up with other popular concepts like grit, hardiness, and mental toughness. They are all related, for sure, but they are not the same thing. So let's clear up some of that confusion. This diagram right here from the source material does a great job of sorting it all out. We're going to break this down piece by piece, and we'll start with the one that's probably most closely related to resilience: hardiness. The best way to think about hardiness is as a set of attitudes. A hardy person tends to see challenges as opportunities. They believe they have some control over their lives, and they're committed to finding purpose. These attitudes, they're like a toolkit. They're what you use to develop resilience when you actually face adversity. So hardiness is kind of the pathway to resilience. Now, this one is a really important distinction. Both resilience and mental toughness are about performing under pressure, but their goals are totally different. The goal of resilience is to adapt and maintain your well-being. Mental toughness, which is often studied in, say, elite athletes or soldiers, is about outperforming others. It's the difference between adapting versus dominating. This one's pretty straightforward. It's basically a cause and effect relationship. Resilience is a personal resource that you have inside you. Work engagement is a positive state of mind you have about your job. And what the research shows is that if you're more resilient, you're much more likely to have higher work engagement. And finally, grit. You've probably heard of this one, right? Angela Duckworth defined it as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. The key difference here is the outcome. Grit is all about achieving a success, like finishing your degree or hitting a major sales target. Resilience is about maintaining your well-being, things like having lower stress and depression. You can absolutely have grit and still burn out. Resilience is what sustains you along the way. Okay, so all of this brings us to what is maybe the single most important evolution in how we understand resilience. The huge shift from seeing it as a fixed trait you're born with to seeing it as a dynamic process.
I mean, just look at the official definition from the American Psychological Association. What's the very first word? Process. It's the process of adapting well in the face of adversity. This isn't about being born tough or invulnerable. It's about learning how to adapt. That one word changes everything.
So here's the bottom line, the thing to really take away from all this. Your level of resilience is not fixed. It isn't a score you get on a test. It's a capacity that can grow with experience, but, and this is a really big but, it can also be depleted by an unsupportive environment, and that has massive implications. Which brings us right back to where we started, with our doctors. If resilience is a process and it's influenced by the environment, then we have to ask a really tough question. When people are burning out, is it a failure of the individual to be resilient, or is it a failure of the system they're in? This quote from the source material is such a powerful metaphor. It just says it all. You can have the most resilient, tough, gritty person in the world at the helm, but individual strength has its limits when it comes up against a massive systemic problem. The iceberg is the system.
So what does fixing the system actually look like? Well, it's not just about telling people to do more yoga. It's about real institutional change. Things like what the ACGME has proposed, reducing all the administrative tasks, giving doctors more flexibility and autonomy, actually protecting their time with patients, and making sure they can get mental health care. That's how you build a resilient environment.
So we'll end with a question for you to think about. Is resilience a personal shield that we're each supposed to build to protect ourselves? Or is it more like a collective shelter that we have to build for each other? I think what the science is telling us is that we desperately need both.